This is the Acts 2028 podcast,
where two young Church of God pastors
discuss the challenges and victories we face in leading revitalization.
I am TJ Samuelu.
I am Brian Seidel.
I am in an urban context in Seattle, Washington.
I am in a suburban and rural context in Boise, Idaho.
I am in a liberal state.
I am in a conservative state.
My ministry background is in missions.
My ministry background is in youth ministry.
And yet we are both in our first lead roles.
To help God revitalize the existing church in the Pacific Northwest.
We are helping each other.
And you.
To truly live out Acts 2028.
Here we are again, TJ, back for another episode. And as we jump into this, we have kind of our plan for what we're going to talk about, but we are coming right off of Halloween. And last episode, we talked about different holiday events and things that we do with the church. And here we are right after one. I know both of our churches did things with Halloween. I talked about it. I've talked about in previous episodes, our trunk or treat event, which we did again. And I think your church did a similar thing, right?
Yeah. So we had an opportunity to do a trunk or treat. And it was a collaborative effort between the Child Center. That's one of our biggest outreaches. So it was kind of a collaborative effort between the parents and the families of the Child Center and those from the church. So we kind of pulled them together. We made it one event to kind of be more of a community-based, obviously, in nature, but it was kind of inside for insular, like the parents and the families that participate and use us for that ministry of the Child Center came, and then also those in the community. So it was really cool to be able to do that. And that's kind of one of those new things. We talked, kind of things, and as we start them, I know you guys have been doing it for a while, but like we started last year in the midst of the pandemic. And again, I think if you dared to do that during the pandemic, it was still different than this year because not everybody was willing, or we didn't know what to do or what that looked like or what was okay, or can you even hand candy? In fact, this year, right across the road, because we're here in the city, I mean, it's just literally across the street, there's a big retaining wall for one of the houses. And I think they still were kind of like in the non-contact part. So they put they taped candy to that retaining wall for people just said, take one. So,
oh, wow.
Yeah. I mean, I think anywhere in between, you're still going to have those things, but what is it to be a good steward? How do you continue to work through those things? And then ultimately, I mean, I grew up, we talked about those things of like more like harvest party kind of thing. Halloween, even doing trunk or treat seemed too close for a lot of people back in the day to just celebrating something that was evil, and they just couldn't do that. So again, we talked purpose, why those things, how do we help the community? What are we using and how can we use that for kingdom work? Maybe even at the very least, get people on campus so that they're familiar with it, and maybe just have them come in contact with some people. So we're not just the crazy folks they drive by on a Sunday and stuff. So.
Yeah, absolutely. One of the things that we did at ours, which we've always kind of had, we have like a line, where people line up before they start through the cars. And what we did last year, the first time we ever did it, was we had people at the start gate of the line to regulate the flow of people, to keep people separated out and kind of whatever. So this year we didn't have to do that, but we decided to do it anyways, just because it kind of controlled the chaos, right, of the hundreds of people coming through the cars. So we did that, set up the line, everybody lined up, but me and my Spanish pastor, the two of us stood at the front of the line and to be the gatekeepers of the start gate. And so we just had, a family go through at a time. But they come up and stop. And so we got a chance to talk to them for even just, 5-10 seconds even. But so we got to meet them. We handed out church invite cards, and, it was a great time. And I just for me and him to stand there and so we literally talked to everybody who went through that way. And, we still had some families that snuck in the other way or didn't go through the, right way or whatever. But, and we certainly noticed that, but like I said, for everybody that went through, so that was a huge thing, which again was the first time that we'd ever, well, at least that I had ever been in like at that role. And so, but, and that's, me and our only other pastoral staff person, for us to be able to greet people and welcome them. That was just a really fun thing for me to do. So like I said, we got to talk with a lot of people. So But yeah, again, it was different this year than last because of the pandemic stuff, which obviously we're still in the pandemic. It's not over, but it's certainly a lot different than it was a year ago. So yeah, again, a very positive event for us. And, we're hoping that we might even see some people Sunday, come from it, or, and that was one of the things that I said to our church is we had great engagement. I know I told you that before, that the volunteers from our church, the donations of candy, the people helping with carnival games and food and everything was just off the charts for us. I mean, more interaction than we've had, especially in the last few years, of people volunteering and coming to serve. And so that was tremendous to see that engagement level. And they said, and a lot of people I think really caught the vision, but seeing it happen and seeing the community show up in hundreds of and droves of people, which was awesome. But what I told them, I was like, man, we hope that they might come for free candy, but they're going to find, the love of Jesus. And that's what we hope happened with that event. And, that again, trunk or treat, we hope was going to be the first step in someone's faith journey. Right. And coming to Jesus. So I don't know, like I said, we just kind of wait and see if that's true or not, but we of course have the hope of that. I think that's the hope of any outreach type of event that you do for your community.
Yeah. And we had fun. I mean, if there was a side note, I mean, my family did a trunk. My wife did like action heroes and things like that. She was aptly Wonder Woman. But
Very nice.
I did an easy up with one of the rolling TVs. So I had about a 50-inch screen out in the parking lot that also coincidentally had the Seahawk game that was going at the same time.
Shocker. I can't believe you would do that. Huh?
Yeah. So when you can marry passions with ministry, I think that's always a great thing. I'm a bit joking, but it was one of those things that obviously, there was people that, again, the thing is like, we know this as pastors and stuff, but we know that we're humans just like those that we serve. And it was like, man, how many dads are out there that are like, oh man, I got to take my kid to this thing, but I really want to be watching the game right now. And so like ours was a little different and I am familiar with your system because like we did that at Cloverdale and some of those things in the past, like a line. We kind of did like, so we had all the cars kind of create a horseshoe around. And so they were on the perimeter. And then the inside, this open area of the horseshoe would have been the building. And so that's where we had like drinks and the tent. That was kind of my trunk with like the TV and stuff. So like people could like watch their kids go through. So again, outing yourself of, I'm sure that there were some kids that took seconds on a few of the trunks, but because there wasn't that rigid, like, hey, as they progress through. But it did create an atmosphere where people could fellowship in the middle. And they didn't have to worry about like where their kid was. They could keep an eye on them as they progressed through that horseshoe and just kind of watch from the inside. Because we only had probably like mid 20s to 30s tops, 30 tops as cars. So it was just easy in our big parking lot to have that many cars, 25, 30 cars. So
yeah,
it was really good. It worked out well. I think, having that passion, having some of those people, I think there were some dads that found themselves participating and happy for that. So.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, as we say, what we're going to talk about today, which brings in, and you mentioned, right, which is true, that even we as pastors, as church leaders, we are humans as well. And so we do have, emotions and ups and downs and struggles and frustrations and victories and all of those things. We experience that in our own faith journey, in our own communication with God and in leading. And the other side of that is that leadership can be lonely, right? And especially top leadership, and especially in potentially an established church in a revitalization situation, which is typically a smaller church and where you might be the only staff or the only full-time staff. I know as far as, you have like child center employees and stuff, but church-wise, you are the lone staff member, right? And again, that's the way it was for me at Oregon Trail when I started as well. We did have some, of course, volunteer people and some very part-time staff members. Like we had, but But even now, as we've grown, like, I mean, I do have other staff, but I am still the only full-time employee of the church.
Right.
And again, we can go into that another day because I have a philosophy of why that is. I mean, we are big enough to have a few other full-time people, but we don't on purpose. And that's probably for a different day. Talk about staffing or structures and those kinds of things. But with that said, is as leaders, though, we do need to find ways to connect in community, and even in safe ways. And like we say, as the pastor of the church, like you said, you have to be careful about who you share what with, and in what context or whatever that might be. Not saying that you need to be deceptive. You shouldn't be deceptive to people, or hide secrets, but at the same time, we do have to be kind of careful on who we confide in, what we present, how we find community. One of the interesting things, just to kind of get our kind of conversation going, was when I came to Oregon Trail, I followed a pastor. His name is Don Bertelson. He was the pastor for just about, I think it was 22 years at Oregon Trail before I came. And he had led the church to some great growth and lots of wins and then just again church drama and some staffing stuff and just different things going on in the church where there's just kind of a big blow up, and it kind of imploded in a lot of ways. And so, but which is why Don was stepping out. I mean, he was kind of towards retirement age, was ready to leave. That's why they were seeking a new pastor and just a new vision and to kind of rebuild it. But yeah, to say is, after I came here, though, 6 months into that, I actually hired Don back as my associate pastor for the first couple of years I was here, and he was part-time a little bit. And again, I know some people ask, are like, how would that even work? And in a lot of contexts, it probably wouldn't, but it worked really well here. And some of it was just the guy that Don is and his personality. And again, he was really good at just pointing people back to me and in that situation. But at the same time, he did care for, again, the older people that were keeping the church open right before we came, and that were the core of it when I got here. And again, we were one of the few young families that was here when we got here. And so he had pastored those people right for 20 years. I mean, they loved him. And so that was a huge help to me. And again, that's probably another episode as well. But the reason I bring it up is because I remember him even just watching me lead, and the way that we connected with families and got into the community, and when families come, and how we hung out and had people over for dinner and to our house, and kind of all these things, we connected with the new and old people. And the thing that he said, he was like, it was very interesting, because he said him growing up through seminary, through his leadership training, whatever, he was specifically told to not be friends with people in his congregation. Like, they were taught to keep this separation. And he said the problem with that was that his family suffered with lack of community, even as he served. And so again, he noticed that change, right, very quickly, on the way that I led and the way that my family was involved, compared to the way that he had led and the way his family wasn't involved, and again, purposely so, in some different things. And so, and I'll tell you, is again, as we built community in our life, like, that's part of how the church built, right, was us connecting with people, in our neighborhood, and through my kids' sports, and through, different things. Again, just our friends started coming to the church. And so, but again, we did not distance ourselves necessarily. And now, again, like I said, we were careful, right, on who we had accountability partners, those kinds of things. But we found, again, lots of friends, right, in the church. And again, that was one of the hardest things for us to leave Cloverdale, because we had been there a long time. We had really close friends there. And, I mean, people that our kids had grown up with, and, families that we did camping trips with, and kind of all kinds of things, even at that Cloverdale context. And so stepping out, that was part of what felt so foreign when we came to Oregon Trail, was because we were leaving that behind in a lot of ways.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I get that. And we weren't there obviously as long. We can share that same sentiment. We were there 4 years, but I think even in that context, we grew, and Cloverdale grew again in that age group, because there was, I mean, your kids are obviously older than my kids, with the exception of the new addition of Claire. But there was, we'd gone, when we came on the staff there was we'd lost the children's pastor and stuff as well. So that rebuilding some of those things in community, I get that. I think that makes sense. because you're living life together. And anytime I've seen a church modeled well, is they have that anchoring point to where they're able to live life um, with, Jesus being the subject, I guess, if you're looking
Yeah.
for a phrase, but like they can work together and there's a relational value and you're walking through the same thing. So it's authentic. It's not like, I'm out of touch. I don't know what it's like to have a teenager or those things. So I think that that's super important. I think we should, obviously have those connectivity pieces. Um, Shout out to DB, Don Burleson. That's a guy, as you said, you
Yeah.
had him, and then when I was at Cloverdale, he had come over to help on the staff. And I think what you said was apt. The scenario you kind of just defined takes a unique person and one that it's not about them. And I mean, let's be honest, as we are taking on these roles of revitalization, and you're being that, it's tough sometimes. It's an identity of being the lead guy and knowing and having to make those decisions. And part of that might have been obviously from where Don was at, like you just described, that he was kind of tired in the sense of he needed that break. And so that was very easy for him, and probably even from a compassionate level, because he'd bumped up against him that he wanted to help. And so again, I don't think your scenario maybe plays itself out in every situation, but with someone like Don who has those qualities, that knows it's not about him in that regard, uh,
Yeah.
I'm glad that you had that. I'm glad that I had a chance to, again, because he loves that element of still teaching and having that
Yeah.
community. So like, man, I I'd be honest, like you said, you just described, I'm the only one really on our staff. We have some part-time people that help with like, just worship on the weekends and stuff like that. But um boy, what I wouldn't give for a Don Bertelson to wind up like as he's helped with the Joy Group or Sunday school teaching or one of those things. So
Yeah.
someday, again, that would be another story. But yeah, shout out to the to DB. But anyhow, I think those things are really important, and connecting and understanding. I think for us, that's the same thing, and we've experienced some of that too. Is in an established church, some of those things is the younger piece, and I think that's been hard for us to understand. What does that look like? What is that as far as getting them connected, getting them engaged? And so, like we just let in with that event that we had, our weakest part is some of those young families. Now, some of those young families that bought into Trunk or Treat, that partnered with us, some of them go to other local churches. And so whether that's like St. Catherine's, the Catholic church that's just up the road, and a couple others, but yeah, making it an outreach, trying to live that life together because we're in community. So yeah, I think those are all great points.
So again, so we've addressed the first one, right? One of the first places you find community is within your church. And so again, finally, again, at least I found, I don't know any other way to minister to people really other than relationally. I mean, that's just kind of who I am. And that's what we've always done. I mean, that's how we did youth ministry. That's the way that we've led Oregon Trail. And so again, just that, like I said, and I don't know if it's old school or whatever it is, but like I said, the way that Dawn described, that, that they were taught to be a pastor, and to lead people. And again, and I would say like him and even just that generation of pastors, like they were some of the most caring pastors as far as pastoral care and, hospital visits and home visits and those kind of things. And again, stuff that we kind of don't do anymore. I don't know about you, but kind of in that context, like our culture has just changed dramatically. So again, I don't want to say that they, again, didn't care for the people, because I think they absolutely did. It was just a different way, right? Where, again, different style, I guess, whether as our culture has changed or whatever, but, but they were taught to not be friends, right? Specifically with their congregational members, just to keep them at a safe distance. And I have no idea what a safe distance is. I can't imagine, ministering from a safe distance. That just feels so crazy to me. But
I think that when you talk about the relational value, I think that the pivot in that is, it's very difficult. Like you said, just being transparent. But I think that the biggest obstacle, why I'm in the same line of thought, is if you are elevated, you'll see those moments where, like say, uh, televangelists or egos or any of those kind of things. If you're above others, you can also feed into that, like, oh well, the pastor does this, they, and you become larger. And again, reminding ourselves that, about Jesus and why we're serving. And Jesus himself came to serve, not to be served. And so, like, when you look at those pieces in a relational value, you see that, and it doesn't allow you to get to the ivory tower. So that one is a checks and balance element for me.
Yeah.
And the other piece is, like, you really have to, like, you just want to be able to connect with the people in a meaningful way. Because I think if you don't, like, for me, like in the city of Seattle, if I just came out and said, here's how you're supposed to look, and us being leaders, like you said, in the leadership role, if we are the poster child, if someone comes in from, like, say, this event we had this weekend, and they look at it and their first impression is, oh, here's this guy, the pastor, and he does this, this, and this, and he looks like this, that's obviously not me. So I must not be able to fit this role. And I can't be a faith believer because I'm not a Christian, because I can't do those things. And so, like, I think intentionally, again, like, I'm not trying to go to another extreme, water myself down to be a heathen. I understand the
Yeah.
calling and all those things that I have. But at the same time, if you're going to be evangelistic in nature, and, like, they can't see themselves, at least you drawing the parallel. And I'm not saying that we have to be, like, worldly. I'm just saying, if they can't see you as a person or see how their story can connect to the God that you're talking about, like, how are you going to reach them? And so, like, I think those are some of the biggest factors. So the checks and balance to know who we are and our role and who we serve. And then the second is, man, knowing that if you want to get people in the door, and if you bring them in, and the whole vibe is, you have to act this way, you have to do these things, you have to, no, really, that new covenant, we live on this side of the cross, and what Christ did on that made that. It's that unwarranted grace. Now we do have moral standards and some non-negotiables that we have, but at the same time, you know, come as you are. I mean, like, I think of Billy Graham. It's not like, don't go, like, our whole message isn't like, hey, thank you for coming to the trunk or treat today. If you would just go and scrub your life and get it all better in about 2 months and then come back to us, we'd really appreciate that. That just doesn't work. Just as much as, like, in Seattle, like, I'm wearing the Mariners thing today. So, like, I went down to a Mariners game, and I'm glad my calling isn't to preach hellfire and brimstone, like the guy that's always down by the Griffey
Yeah.
statue. Like, he is just yelling at people, like, you're burning in hell, you're an abomination, and you're doing these things. And, like, I get that, and I'm not trying to water down his ministry. And I'm just, like I said, I'm glad that God didn't call me to that. But it is tough just being on the other side and hearing people as you're walking in line and hearing them snicker about, like, that guy's an idiot and those things. And, like, I'm praying for the guy because I know, like, man, they need to hear um truth. But I don't know how well any of us, as we reach out in community, like any group, and this is outside of church, like, we both play golf. But if I said you and I were looking for two more guys for a foursome, and we're like, hey, you're an absolute idiot, you suck, you're terrible, you're all these things, hey, by the way, would you like to be a part of our team? Like, I just don't know, again, in a relational value, to get back to that whole thing, is like, how many people are going to sign up for that? Yeah, I want to be a part of those guys.
Yeah, exactly.
So
Yeah, which just is a great segue to say. So one, yes, we can find community within our church family, right, and within the church that God's called us. The other place is to truly find community, I guess, to not be redundant, but in your community, right? Like, I mean, in your neighborhood, in around, and like you said, you mentioned golf. That's one of the reasons I purposely play men's league golf at the course where I'm at, where my membership is at, because I don't want to completely surround myself. And that would be very easy to do as a pastor, right? To completely insulate my life with just being completely surrounded by Christian people. And like you said, to evangelize, right, and to see community, to reach the community that God's put your church in, you need to also be in it. You need to know who those people are, right? Because community is still about people, and the gospel is about people. And so, and that is kind of as a relational issue. So again, I think in that, finding community in places, and I think the other side of that is finding that one of the things too I love about my men's league golf team is that I'm not the leader. And that's it's a release for me to go, I mean, play a game that I love, that I'm okay at some days, right? To go to be surrounded by people who aren't believers, right? And it kind of reminds me of what the world's like, and what our mission is. But also the other side of that is it's also kind of therapeutic for me to go and not be in charge. Right. And that's, I mean, that's one of the things, just as a leader, as a pastor, like so many times, like you're always in charge of stuff. And so again, there's some real refreshing that can come in that community of, of even with people who might not even know that I'm a pastor. Right. And that's, I've had some of those different experiences. Now, I mean, most of the people in men's league and at the course out at Purple Sage, the course I play at, most of them know I'm a pastor. Right. But at the same time, like, I don't go there, to convert them, and like, and again, and they know that, but at the same time, they do know they can talk to me if they want to, right. Or have spiritual questions or whatever. And some of them have, right. But that's not my purpose in going there. But my purpose is to find community in our community. And that's just one example, right? I mean, there's other things, I mentioned to you before we started talking about one of the other ways was just with my kids and in the phase they were in their middle school, late elementary, middle school, high school years. We found a lot of community around their sports teams. Right. And, getting to meet other families, even as I coached their football teams, and I've coached different things that they've been involved in. Like I said, and that's another arena for me to not be Pastor Brian, but to be Coach Brian, right? Or Parent Brian. I mean, and again, for them to not know that. And because we know, right? I mean, the conversation always changes when they know you're a pastor. And so, again, we found that just great community things. The other side of it, right? Again, my wife is an educator. She's in the public schools. And so we found it also community, right, in the school systems. And again, my kids are all in public school. And again, that's probably a different conversation of whether your kids should be or not, or, whatever. And just to say that my position is you need to do what God leads you to do with your family, but God led our family to be in public school. And so that's where they're at. And we found community in that as well. And, whether it's PTO or, different fundraising things or whatever it is that we do through the school systems too. Like we've engaged into that.
Yeah. And I think those passion areas, I mean, really that's kind of, again, um, not like, I don't know why we keep it a secret, but it's like you have this background in youth, as you said. And it's kind of like, we know this as ministers and as people that are trying to be relational with people, but it's not our angle. But it's like when you love on what other people love on or their value, you create an instant bond with them. So like you as a youth pastor and those people that you had created some of those bonds with at Cloverdale, they knew like, man, Brian loves my kid. And so at the same time, I appreciate that. And so oftentimes as well, like, if you look at churches over the course of being in the community, if they have a dynamic youth group and stuff where people are coming in, you can also correlate and look back sometimes at some of the growth in the church, because there's going to be things where parents are going to like, why is my kid acting different? What's going on over there? Like, I want to go check this out. And if you love on what they love on, and it could be on the other end of the spectrum. I mean, we talked about DB and those things of being a joy group. For those that don't know, it's called Just Older Youth, another acronym to throw at you, but it's like a 55 plus group. But that's the same thing. If you are loving on a parent that doesn't have community, especially like during this COVID time and stuff like that, their adult kids may want to come and say, hey, why are they loving on my parents? Why are they helping? And they may be intrigued as well. And so this isn't an angle or an objective. I'm just saying, in some of these things where you have those strengths, where you have those passions, and where people engage, at this point, there's also an equippedness. Like, so we talked about staffing or a key layperson that just is passionate about bringing this group together. You can also start to see some of those growth and some of those things taking place, and not from the standpoints of, I mean, I think one of the things I went through when we went through a training called C4, it's during this time we've had to reestablish a scorecard. So historically, a scorecard for churches always was like, how many people do you have? What is your tithing like? How many people were baptized? Like, it was all numerically based oftentimes. And so like I think that's been recalibrated when, people are seeing a fraction of the church that used to come on any given Sunday before that. Numbers might be down, but a better rubric or scorecard would be like, what is our impact in the community? Like if we cease to exist, would they notice that? And so it doesn't matter how many cars we have in the parking lot. If we are being the hands and feet of Christ, and in that part, as we've been working through our church here, we've been going through Luke 15, and you're talking about Jesus. They're asking him, why, the Pharisees are asked, why are you hanging out with these sinners, right? The tax collectors, these sinners, and those things. Again, like, why are you engaging with community in this way? Like, we're more important. And so he gives the three stories that we're familiar with, right? The first one is the sheep, the 99 that are in the fold, and the one that is lost. And so again, Jesus says that heaven throws a party for that one that's lost. So part of community is us living out the Great Commission, discipleship, all of those things. So this is something that should be innately in us. Some of us are going to be more vocal about that. We have different giftings. I get that. But then we transition onto the one that's a lost coin. Just because we're in the house and we might be lost, but we know it's in the house, there still might be something like that with our core group or our families or those things. So again, makes the point of community inside of the church that might still be lost and we still need to reach them. And then the last one is the prodigal son, is knowing that, man, is as we go out and we want to see what the world has to offer, but yet we engage with all those things, but we're still empty. Um, Knowing truth and that there's a loving father that desires to have relationship. And even in that, we know the other story is not just the son that went away, it's the son that's bitter that was there, that felt like he was doing everything right, and then gets kind of the short end of the stick, as he feels like, man, here was this squanderer that went and blew everything, and I want to go probably punch him in his face. But dad loves him, and he's like showering him with great love, and it's foreign. So I think, when you talk about community, even in those three short stories in Luke 15, you have one that's outside of your community, or that's there like as a sheep outside of the pen, or those things. Then you have those that are in your house that you can reach community wise. And then I think that those things all apply, but how do you do that? How are you loving on people? How are you engaging with them? And that's not to, I think what Jesus also says is he still calls them all lost, meaning that there's sin in that. So he's not like, I just only go after the lost people. I'm not paying attention to those that are saved. But I think, man, community is, you have to empower and you have to invite those. So like when you said you love that you get buy-in from your people for these events to do that, I think that's the best case scenario, because they're getting to put their faith into action. It's the application piece of that, and they're living it out and they're putting it into play. So yeah, I love that. But I mean, I guess I'm stewing through that as we are continuing in the series we're on.
Yeah. Well, I think, but that also brings in, again, other places that you can serve your community. Like I said, we found that in another place that I just started doing, again, as my kids get older. And like I said, we're kind of in this weird middle part where, I have like older teenagers and then a 3-year-old. So again, we don't have anybody in like community sports right now because they're all in like school sports. Right. So anyways, that's to say, like, one of the things I felt God lead me to do was I started serving this last year on our local chamber of commerce board. Right. And again, it just got me in, I'm meeting a whole new circle of people, right? Kind of in the business community and kind of doing that. And like, and again, you think, well, but that has nothing to do with the church. And I was like, well, technically it doesn't. Right. But I am learning a ton about my community around our church, right? And the business owners in that community and those different things, because it is absolutely a part of the mission that God's called me to. And so, it is an extension, right, of what our church is doing for that. And again, and I know that you're involved in some different kind of civic or community organizations and things like that as well. And so I think that's another place to find community, or for you to, again, to get involved into things, even if you don't have kids. I mean, there are places you can find that. And again, just on these volunteer boards or different organizations and things like that. So, all right. So just in respect to time, I want to move on. So we talked about kind of finding community within your church family, congregation, wherever you're at. We've talked about even just finding community in your actual community, right, around your church or where you live. those kinds of things. Now, the other thing, what about the pastoral community? And I think that's another thing that we need to look at and to say, because we said, right, like, hey, there are some things I can't talk to, my board chairman about, or there's some things that I can't, just our neighbors that come to our church. Like there's things I can't, and even things that they might not even understand, right, about a leader's life or a pastor's life or whatever it might be. And so that's the other thing, right, is you can find it among other pastors, other spiritual leaders in your community. Now, again, at a larger church, and like I said, we both served, like Cloverdale was a larger church, had a larger staff. And so I found some of that community just within the staff of our church, right? And now, again, that's not true probably in a revitalization, established church type situation, as we already talked about, especially if you're the only person. So again, how can you find that?
Yeah. So I would say, like you said, one of those for me is they have a local area pastor. So, and where I'm at, it's the North Seattle pastors. They meet once a month intentionally to have an engagement piece, and it's spearheaded by one person, but he builds community, and there's a value add. So, like, as we go through things, as we were going through the social injustice, we'd invite a speaker or something to come to encourage us, or maybe since we're all working through these same things, how do you have that? But I think that's important because one of the things that Satan has as a tool is isolation. And so,
Absolutely.
like, I think, that's what's been hard about COVID and those things, or people that struggle with depression. It's very easy to just slip into the, oh, well, I'm supposed to be isolated. And I mean, I think community is the opposite of that, right? I mean, that's what
Yeah.
we're talking about today. And so I think when you have those moments, so I have to engage with that. It's kind of like, that's my piece of saying, you know, Jesus will come 999 steps to go back to that piece of finding the sheep if we will take that one to repent. It takes an action on our half. And so finding and seeking that out and trying to find ways to connect with people, and it doesn't have to be necessarily your denomination or something that you're part of. It could be a different group of pastors or things, as long as you're biblically sound, right? But
Sure.
like, as long as you're engaging with that, because you're right, there are some things that people don't understand context, what it's like to be in ministry at times if they've never seen that before, as well as if you're a first time pastor and you're coming into a revitalization. I think that one of the lies that could be told, and I know that I suffered from this, was, um, man, if you don't have all the answers, maybe they think that you're a fraud or you're not supposed to be in leadership. Maybe we got this wrong, or whatever that case may be. Is that those things will cross your mind. And spoiler alert, like, nobody has all the answers, myself included.
Amen.
So I mean,
Yeah, I know I don't.
we
So
can walk past that part already, but like, I think again, just not knowing that, where to find that, where to be transparent, because again, even if you boiled it down to, like, say, a situation where people are more used to seeing that, if you're listening and you're a layperson or those things, you can get more intimate if we've been in a small group and we kind of understand that dynamic, like we've been together, we've lived life, we kind of understand those things. You open up more than you would with just a normal person. But
yeah.
oftentimes you don't show up to a small group and just like vomit all over people right away. Like, here's all the stuff that I went through. And so I think knowing when, but not allowing Satan to have the foothold to say, oh, yeah, don't share. So I think that's a balance that we have to be cognizant of. But like you said, churches, other pastors in your area, Church of God, hopefully, we have things like regional pastors as well. Hopefully some of those are resources that you could utilize to engage, um, and
Yeah.
just find ways to plug in, because man, when you're in the midst of a storm, you need another help sometimes with your compass to make sure it's true north is still where God is leading you.
Yeah. Again, as you say that, again, I have, there's a group of pastors in Caldwell, which is, one of the communities that we primarily minister to. And I've been going to that one again for that meeting, and we meet once a week, which everybody doesn't make it every week, but we do it, once a week to just stay consistent. And I've found just great comfort and help and encouragement from that group. And again, and that group is very interdenominational. I mean, thinking about the ones that are regular there, I mean, we have from Free Methodist and Presbyterian and Church of Christ and Church of God, because I'm there, right? I mean, there's, all kinds of these different, lots of theological spectrum differences and mainline denominations and, community churches. I mean, we're kind of all represented there. But that's been turned into an awesome thing. And I think I remember when I came out to Oregon Trail, again, there wasn't anything even in Middleton. And I started it, right, with our pastors. And so now, again, we have a regular text group between all the pastors in Middleton. And again, we've had seasons where we met together for prayer and meetings consistently, and where then they didn't happen. And like I said, right now we're not meeting consistently, but yet we still text each other and encourage each other to, hey man, I'm praying for you. Like, again, I just this last Saturday, I got a text from one of the other Middleton pastors, like, hey, just praying for you guys, kill it tomorrow. Like, and so, which is just awesome to find that. And, and to say that coming out of youth ministry, I didn't realize how good youth workers were at community and at, the just networking together. And I found that, and whether it's through conferences or through different things in the youth ministry community. And that was one of the things that was most shocking to me, moving from youth ministry into like the lead pastor role and into that world of lead pastors and senior pastors. It was so different. And I felt like the youth workers like wanted to collaborate and be together and, work together. We kind of all knew that we were on the same team. And yet I found just this horrible spirit of like competition and like territorialism and kind of all this just weirdness within lead pastors and senior pastors. And so, like I said, so I just tried to create something different. And so I'd say if you don't have that, then start it, right? Like, just call a couple other churches in your community and just say, hey, like I'm, do you want to pray together once a month, and just, hey, we're on the same team. We all believe Jesus is the Messiah. So, and we're ministering, like I said, we're ministering in the same community. Can we help each other understand more of what's going on, or, whatever. So yeah, I'd say definitely like seek that out if you don't have that. And then, so we talked about within your church, our community, pastoral community, like I said, even if you don't have it locally, and I kind of hesitate to say, but like there are some like social media groups and, different things you can get on. Sometimes those, again, turn toxic really fast. So that's why I kind of hesitate to say that, but you can find some community and pastoral community and different things. And whether it's, through social media. But again, I think, but be careful. I wouldn't spend, I don't know. That's just my own experience maybe, but, and that, but I think the other side of that is then how do you find just even your own personal accountability? And I think that's kind of where you find that is that your inner circle of people that you truly can bare your soul to, and I think it's really important that you have those people that are trusted, and those might be in any of these circles, right? Again, just have those core central people that you can come to right when you're struggling, and that again, you can call them and be like, man, it's just a rough day. Like, I just need to talk to somebody, and again, if you're married, hopefully that's your spouse. Hopefully your marriage is healthy enough that you can do that with your spouse. I know I can with Maureen. And there's times, right, and we have that for each other. But also I have, other people in my life, right, that we come to that. We hope maybe you even find some community, even just through this podcast, right, just hearing our stories. And again, I know we found community with each other, just getting on. And again, we don't record it always, which is probably a good thing, but we get on and kind of touch base with each other and where we're at, even though we're states away. So again, just even you got pastor friends somewhere, like jump on a Zoom call, right, for no other reason than just to find community, and just to be encouraged.
Yeah. And I would say like one that we're a part of that's more nationally as well. It's tougher to engage all the time, like when you're in need, because we all like know when we've been talking about in another group that I'm a part of, kind of the landscape of life. And it has like these different phases of erosion and eruption and excavation and earthquake and all these things. Like uh, if an earthquake happened, just something that's catastrophic, it's quick, you want to be able to like have help. And if we were looking at resources, that could be like a Red Cross kind of moment. And so it's nice to have people boots on the ground, so to speak. But you and I are part of another group that's more nationally based, to get back to that, the Global Strategy Roundtable. And so, to have people nationally, again, sometimes context, the things don't align because we're states away. But the spirit or the intent behind what they did still might apply to us. We just need to find a way to use that in our own. And so, I mean, I think it's good whenever I have things. I actually, this past week, had a conversation with who we had as our guest, with Marcus Archer, who's in Mississippi, which is like, the South to the very tip of the Pacific Northwest. That's like, a different world in a lot of sense of
Yeah.
the word. But being able to just have those processes, I describe it as having, cabinet people, those that love you, in your community, that you can share things with, that will tell you the truth regardless, not just a bunch of yes men as well. So surrounding yourself with a community that would say, TJ, they might stand opposed to you. Like, I don't know if that's a great idea, but you know what? You know that I love you and I'll support you in it. I'm not convinced that's the greatest idea. Um, and so you can process those things. I think if you always just have people that are, again, that has the potential to have some of those ivory tower things of like, oh yeah, whatever you say. I just see that always sometimes play itself out in a way that isn't always easy to come back from. So
Yeah,
for what that's
absolutely.
worth, yeah, there's other opportunities. So
Very good. So again, hopefully you're finding community, you're building community. Like I said, if you're not, again, overarching, right, is just, but you have to put in the effort in order to do that. And again, everything we talked about today is you have to intentionally do. It's not going to happen, just happen for you. You need to put in the effort and to show up, right, to make the phone call, to make the ask, right, whatever that would be, and create that community around you. But I'd tell you, it's, again, not always simple and easy, but it is worth the effort. And that's one of the things that just keeps us moving forward in our roles, right, and in fulfilling everything that God's called us to do. Acts 20:28. So guard yourselves and God's people. Feed and shepherd God's flock, his church, purchased with his own blood, over which the Holy Spirit has appointed you as leaders. The Acts 2028 podcast is a broadcast production of In His Grip Publishing. Our theme music is Achievement by Giovanni Bruno. We'd love to hear from you on our social media accounts or through email. You can like us on Facebook and follow us on Instagram at Acts 2028 Podcast, or send us an email at acts2028podcast@gmail.com. Please subscribe on your favorite podcast platform, leave us ratings and reviews, and even give us your email so you can be notified of new episodes. Thank you for listening, and until next time, we hope that you will lead wherever God has put you, and together we can all live out Acts 2028 as we serve in the established church.